Hello accounts people, time to have a look at all the available methods of overhead appropriation. So what we're after, we want to calculate the costs as accurately as possible, including the overheads of a business, which of course might be millions and millions of pounds. They may even be bigger than the direct costs in service and retail industries. So whether we're calculating the cost, whether we going to build them into a charge and then charge it onto another department or a government department on a cost plus calculation, or to make a decision so we know how much we can get for the item. Is it worth doing or is it not? The activity is very important information for managers. Like a lot of management accountant, the activity of doing it also helps you to understand the nature of a business, and of course these are all predictions, these are all budgeted figures. We're looking at the appropriation for the next year. We won't know how well it worked until the end of the year when we've over or under absorbed. So the primary allocation first, so we're going to appropriate and allocate appropriation in proportion as a fraction to the cost centres. So all the methods use the primary allocation to start off with. Then it splits. The direct method is simple, relatively simple. Service centres are transferred, so credit the service centre, debit the receiver, the main activity, in a suitable mathematical method to the main centres. And then the step down is the really complicated, more traditional one that's supposedly more accurate. So we start off with the least related business activity, appropriate to all the other remaining centres, then the next one, then the next one. So rather than just into the 2, it's into the 5, then into the 4, then into the 3. Having said that, it's important work, so the whole video is only going to take 40-45 minutes, so is it worth it for business? Probably. The information is more useful than the time taken. So combined is a step and then direct, so this has come up recently as an exam. And of course this can be for the spreadsheets unit, I'm doing it on the spreadsheets, as well as for the costing. So they all give slightly different numbers, different overhead absorption rates, so we take a choice, or we might just have a range, and obviously the time taken, we can do all the methods and then compare them and decide what rate to set. The alternative method, ABC costing, does the same job, different way, more appropriate if there's a lot of indirect costs rather than overheads. Questions tend to be manufacturing related, but it can be applied to service or retail, or they tend to use the ABC method. It's a long time since I walked around a factory measuring the square footage of a department in order to do this, and certainly a long time since I did it on spreadsheet in the real world. So this is our table. So the information is normally in separate little boxes up above, which means you end up scrolling up and scrolling down. I put it on a single sheet, and these are our totals of our general overheads and indirect labour. I'm building in lots of checking mechanisms, so they'll show on a spreadsheet if I've entered the formula wrong more than anything else. If you're using a calculator, they'll show calculation errors. Shortcuts doesn't work. Sometimes you've got two costs, and if you've calculated the one, you think you can take it off the total. Well, if you made an error, the other figure's going to be wrong. So we'll do good practice, and you'll see lots of zeros where things check out and we're proving that we're accurate. There's also the possibility of some rounding, not on this one, but a pound is neither here nor there. So our utilities bill is about floor space, and we're going to do some checks afterwards. So floor space, we have the floor space at the top, so it's all these numbers for the 6 departments, and we have a bill of 22,568 to proportion. So this is the primary part, so we need to take the proportion, which will be C2, the floor space for the machining, over the total floor space, which is actually in J2, because I would have added it up first. So that's the proportion, and then times it by the bill, which is our 22,568. So of that 22,568, we have credited the overhead control account and debited the machining department. We put that into the machining department. Similar, except it's now D2 because it's the assemblies floor space. That will stay the same, and the bill will stay the same. and smaller department, smaller bill. We are of course on a computer, so with a few dollar signs, sometimes it's not worth putting them in, it's easy to retype the formula. Those are going to stay the same. It will allow us to go all the way along. So does it look like, yeah, smaller department, smaller bills? It seems to have worked. And as I'm going along, or at any point really, I can just check, add those up. Yes, we're adding up neatly. You would expect these to add up, they're just type figures. This one's a calculated figure, so no rounding issues. So our floor space again for our rent and rate. So, you know, the bigger the department, the bigger the bill it's going to get. So it's still C2 and it's still J2, it's still over the total. The difference is it's now times the bill for rent and rates, which is J11. Much bigger bill, much bigger number coming out. But it's still going to be in proportion, so it's going to be a bit smaller and the others are going to be a lot smaller. I'm just going to copy it across once I've made these absolutely. So I need to put the dollar sign in front of the letter because I'm going across. Yeah, smaller, much smaller. Yep, looks in proportion. Again, check how we're going. Yep, that's okay. Even on that big number, not a rounding issue. So the difference is now managers spend most of their time looking after staff, so we're using the labour hours, which is in row 5. And we've got our total, and our bill is now the management bill, J12. Again, it's just use hybrid or half absolute. Does it look like, again, labour hours, more labour hours here, decent amount there. So yeah, it looks right, and of course it adds up. It would of course be possible to do the formula wrong and it still adds up right in some ways. Depreciation is about the machine value. Well, actually all the machinery is in the machining department, so we're expecting nearly all the bill here, and smaller bills obviously got a bit of cooking equipment and they've got a couple of laptops and stuff. So our machine value is now C4. As a proportion times the bill. And yes, we're expecting to see nearly all the bill there, and again we can take a bit of, or we can carry on doing this manually. Obviously if you've got to do it on a calculator, you've got to do every single calculation correctly. There are some bits that you can add up and write down, so you're not using the same numbers or typing in the same numbers all the time. That looks about right. Very small amounts, bigger, yeah, looks in proportion. There we are. So now we've done that, we can add up our total overheads, and that's our primary allocation and appropriation done. So it's very easy to forget about things that you're told about, they're allocated. This is just the bill, so obviously that bill was so specific it had to be given to the machining department. And indirect labourers, perhaps the supervisors and other staff that belong in the department. You would expect indirect labour in the admin department, of course, because they're all indirect. So that's the primary. Now that matters for all the other method, or the other method, to direct and the combined method. So we're not going to do that bit again. They're already ready to do. So the direct calculations are actually fairly short, and all we're going to do is working from the left. Doesn't have to be from the left, but it usually is. It's customary to do it this way, and then the step down works from the right as you look at it. And we need to split the stores bill between the machining and assembly department, so the service departments into the stores bill. So okay, we need to calculate the stores bill first. So making sure we get the right selection and don't miss off the allocated ones. That's our total stores bill, and of course we can just double check we've got back to the number. So numbers being calculated different ways as a checking process, typical accounting. So this is on the basis of purchase requisitions, so it's similar mathematics. So the purchase requisitions are in cell C6, but I only need the purchase requisitions total, not for the whole company, just for the machining and assembly department. If this was an orange being split, I'm splitting it between the two of them, not 6 departments. And just those 2, and then times it by the bill, which is for stores department E14. For the assembly, again, as a proportion of the 2, still times the bill for the stores department. So those 2, they do add up to these, but we'll just double check it. Not all questions bother with these minus numbers. If you do naught minus, what's effectively the totals, that comes out as a minus number. We can see it's the same number, so we know that when we go across, we're going to get a 0. And also we have credited stores and debited machining and assembly, so actually our total here should come down to 0. Of course, on a spreadsheet it's about formulas, calculator, it's about calculator errors. So different way of representing it, just 40%, so actually this can be easier. We need the bill for canteen times 40%. And the bill for the canteen times 60%. Could be labour hours that, but this one's do the same to get the 0. Missed, but spotted it. So if any of these don't come up to 0, it's telling you you've made an error somewhere, formula or calculator one. Admin in a ratio, so it's the admin bill. Ratio's 3 to 2, so 3 plus 2 are 5, so divide by 5 times by 3. And then, as long as you do division before the multiplication, you haven't got any problems with BidMaths. And again, admin bill divided by 5 times 2. 3 to 2, so you assume from the left. We're now on 18. There we are, and it looks about right. Usually visually they're wrong as well. You know, we'd be used to seeing the patterns, and that number of course is there. Now on the other methods it won't be so clear cut, the vertical checking. And then last of all, personnel. So back to a means on the base of labour hours. Labour hours was C5 for machining divided by only the 2 departments times by the bill for personnel, and then again D5 assembly divided by just the 2 departments again times the bill. Again, let's check it properly, so equals 0. And that bill is that bill, so we're not really worried about this checking, but we're getting into good habits. There we are, so we've zeroed. So now we need to work out a final total. So a common error is not including the original allocation and just doing the reappropriated and reallocated parts. So we need the original total all the way down, and obviously it's easy to get the wrong rows or start up here. And that means we've got a cost between the machine. All our overheads are now sitting in our machining and assembly department. And just to check, we've got our whole amount, 1,560,690. So we can calculate our overhead absorption rate. So that's the overheads allocated. It's a machining department, so not surprising we're going to use machine hours, even though there's a lot less machining hours than labour hours. Assembly, it's all about labour hours. So that'll be on the labour hours. So that is our overhead absorption rate to allow me to work my sums. We'll get different numbers on the different mechanisms. So the second main, much more traditional method is our step down. Now, a bit more complicated. So we've already done the primary bit. It's just the reappropriation and reallocation that needs doing slightly differently. This is supposed to be more accurate. You have the departments that are closest to the production on the left and the ones that are furthest away on the right. And we'll see how to do it. So unlikely to come up as a whole question, you're more likely to get one step and then the rest is direct, which we'll do afterwards. So this first step effectively is going to be repeated. So what we do is you take the personnel, the one on the right, and divide it between all the other 5 departments, and then we're going to go into the 4 departments, 3, and down to our 2. Let's have a look then. So proportions first though. Labour hours is personnel, makes sense. In fact, the first 3 are all labour, make life easier. Divided by, now we don't want the total for the whole 6 departments, we've only got 5 left. I'm doing it in full. C5 plus D5 plus E5 plus F plus G5. Again, our orange, we're now dividing it between 5, not between 6. And then our personnel bill is H14. So I'll do this one as well. So equals D5 divided by just the 5 departments that we're splitting it between. So easy to get that selection wrong. There we are. So more labour hours, bigger bill. Doesn't quite look right though, so that's way off. So what have I done? Equals C. Oh, for some reason I've put minuses in. Not sure why I did that one. So the figures, when I started doing some subtractions instead of some additions, it was the fact that I was expecting a bigger part of the bill, but not that much bigger. That helped me spot it straight away. So now I can start putting in some absolute references in, because I'm not going to do the formulas for the others. We know roughly we've got it right. It's working. And we're going across, so it only needs the dollar sign in front of the letter. Only that far, because we're effectively going to credit this. So this one should be minus that number when we check it. So check in minus, not minus C16 minus E16 minus F16. C15 minus G16. Easy to forget that one out because you can't see it when you're typing in the formula. There we are. So we know pretty much that we're on track because it all adds back up. And in fact, this department total, just like on the direct, was 0. We have credited personnel, debited the other 5 departments. So now we're going to take admin and split it between the 4 remaining departments, but it's not just the original total. We're going to have to remember to do the reappropriated bit from personnel. Okay, sounds complicated. Maybe easier to understand if I do this. So this is understanding. I don't think you're going to have to do this in the exam, but you might do it for real one day. So C, okay, it's labour hours again, so C5. Stop the mistake before I made it. But now we've got 4 departments. Only because we need to split it between the 4 departments. What I've now got to remember I said the original bit plus the reappropriated bit. It's easy when it colours it for you. So yeah, that's gone down to 4 because we're split it between the 4 departments. C5 stays the same, but we've now got to remember to bring in the reappropriated part. And we can absolute these to make half absolute or hybrid absolute. You could also click in it and press F4 and makes it a full hybrid. Could I have typed the formula out 4 times? Oops, it's not going to work. Just need to go on the 4, and we should get a pattern in proportion to the labour hours, and then of course we'll get the mass here. Now it won't be the 402,204, it's going to be these added together. We can check this, but so those are those 2 added together. Well, we'll just double check it properly, and hopefully we've got a 0. If we haven't, we've made a mistake somewhere. Check the formulas, check the calculator, it's doing a job. So we've split personnel between 5 departments, the admin original repro between. So now canteen between the 3, bit quicker because it's only 3. Part of the formula gets shorter, part of it gets longer. It's still on labour hours. So we only want it between the 3. This is the bit that gets longer because it's the original canteen's allocation, appropriation, plus the bit it reappropriated from personnel, and the bit reappropriated from admin. There we are. And not sure I couldn't have done the formulas just as quick. So again, labour hours, yeah, looks in proportion, bit bigger, bit smaller. Let's test it. Okay, what have I done? Hang on, equals 0 minus C18. Not sure what it's telling me I've done wrong. Equals 0 minus C18, D18, E18. Telling me I've got a circular reference. Okay, let's just start again. What have I done wrong? Oh, I've got F18 there, not 17. There we are. Because the F18 was in this formula, that's better. So, thank you Excel for helping me. Now, didn't say this was easy, did I? There we are, that's a 0. And that's now correct. So, one minor little typo, but at least Excel told me I was going wrong. So now we've got to get the stores on the basis of purchase requisitions into the machining and assembly departments. Purchase requisitions are little bits of paper you walk up to stores with, or computer generated instruction to send something somewhere. So we only need, we need the purchase requisitions first. We only need in the first part just the requisition for the 2 departments. Times, I can do this in full, or I could use a sum. We're now getting big enough to be worth doing a sum, but it shows, not D, E14. There we are, we've got the whole lot properly this time. And then equals D6 over there is a time for typing in things plus 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 rather than trying to be careful, clever and use the sum function. Getting there. There we are. So we'll checks good, zeros, and then not forget the original total. Really easy to do. That's a 0. Phew. So that's our main part of our step down done. Very complicated. Into there, into there, into there. Very traditional. And then as our subtotals, and I've just demonstrated how easy it is to forget to put the original totals in, because that's what I should have done. Up to our total, and now our overhead absorption rate on our step down method. Still using machine hours. It's a machining department, although there isn't many of them. Debatable. But that's definitely got to be labour hours. So a little bit less and a little bit more. So slightly different number, but obviously in the number of jobs that we do, that could be quite important difference. So having done both methods, we've got some knowledge and understanding. So why not have a hybrid, a bit of one, a bit of the other? That's what a step down, or 1 step or 2 steps, and then the rest of it being direct does for you. So same primary allocation, same overheads. This bit is exactly the same as the first step we did, the labour hours, C5 divided by the total of the 5, so personnel into the other 5 as it was before. Only the one bill though, so some bits will be a little easier as the personnel's bill. And we could check our answers from earlier, but obviously if we're doing it this way, we'd only probably do it this way. Used to miss one of these out, especially if you've been doing it all day. No, H4 is constant. So when I go across and checking, and obviously we can see that this is going to be okay. And we can see we have transferred just the same as the step method. So again, instead of doing a second full step, we're now going to go direct. We just got to remember the original bit plus the reappropriated bit. So the layout will vary. Step, of course, went right to left. Direct went left to right. Traditionally, it doesn't have to be. Some people don't even bother. They just blank out this whole lot and hope it's right rather than being good accountants and checking everything. We just got to remember this bit and this bit. Different ways of doing it. So we've got purchase requisitions here, labour hours and labour hours. So they're all means really. So purchase requisitions was C6. We're only dividing it into the two departments, the machining and assembly. So we only need C6 and D6, and then timesing it by the stores bill, not forgetting the reappropriated bit. And then this will be D6. So same, apart from being D6, and the same here. And something's gone wrong there. What have I done wrong? E14 and E16 is right. D6. Oh, I did a division instead of a multiplication, but it was obvious. And that is the total of these two. We're fairly confident of that, and just to prove it, there we are. So zeroed and zeroed. So canteen, again it will be the original bit plus the reappropriated bit, but it's now on the basis of labour hours, so we just need the labour hours. And then times, this time, don't get this wrong again, and don't forget that we're now canteen. It used to pick up the numbers from a different column. And then labour hours for the assembly department divided by still canteen F18 14. Looks about right, should be about 185. So again, visual, mathematical skills, as well as in this case zeros and zeros, so we know everything's cross-casting basically. Admin, our last bit then, our labour hours, so it's 400 and something thousand, so quite a big bill. So it's on labour hours again. The original bit, G14. There we go. And then one last bit almost. Getting there. So the labour for the two departments times by looks about right. A bit more labour hours. So that zeroed and that zeroed. So we know our cross casting's working out right, which means we can work out our totals, not forgetting our original one. So easy to do. And that's our total for our two working active departments. Coming back to our original overheads. So one final calculation. Will it be much difference? It's in between, not surprisingly. And in between again. So two main methods, three versions of them. Primary stays the same on them all, and this method does come up. And this of course can be a spreadsheet exercise or costing. So good luck when you first do it on spreadsheets anyway.